Today I am going to tell you a little snippet of folklore about a few wicked water fairy characters. One can understand why evil water fairies became a part of folklore and cautionary tales. The fear of water in a time when people mostly would not have been able to swim, and yet with no running water it would have been an essential everyday task to collect water in large pottery jugs or wooden pails from the wells and the rivers and streams, to clean and wash the home, to wash clothes and themselves, to gather for food preparation or for their animals, and of course to relieve themselves. Accidental drownings were rife in times gone by before the advent of water pumped directly into homes, to the point where poems and ballads, folk songs and stories were written about these tragic events. The supply of water directly to homes came quite late to some rural parts of England, Scotland and Wales and Ireland, later than many people think. Indeed, on researching the tiny Devon village where we used to live, we discovered that pumped water to each cottage, including our own, was only made available in the early to mid-1900s. In the English Parliament it was known as a national disgrace, and this explained why the village water pump was so close to our former home in the centre of the village. Of course, it would have been an essential thing to put an element of fear around water, to be incredibly careful at all times and from as young an age as possible. Children were part of the household working structure, and so would have often been working around deep water and riversides, and so cautionary tales were told of the wicked water fairies that would put the fear of the gods into anyone unfortunate enough to come across them. I used to take my beloved niece and nephew for woodland walks alongside the haunted River Dart in Devon when they were very young children. They were always taught to have respect for the good folk, as all children should. Being from Lancashire, Jenny Greenteeth was the fairy I told them about to keep them safe by the water. They were convinced that the floating reeds and river grasses were the hair of Jenny Greenteeth, and the dark rocks and boulders by the river banks were where she lived. So river walks were safe, but also with a hint of the danger that children love. Of course they knew they were safe because Auntie Kelly would never let Jenny Greenteeth grab them, and she knows all about the fairies. I also know of other friends with youngsters in their families who still use Jenny Greenteeth or the Grindylow as a cautionary tale. Folklore is alive and strong even now. We just don't even think about what we are saying a lot of the time, or why. And for those of us who are aware, well, we just don't speak so freely of it anymore. Now, let's take a peek at some of these wicked water fairies. Jenny Greenteeth. Jenny, also known as Wicked Jenny, is a Lancashire water fairy from the northwest of England, a river hag. It was she whose hair could be seen floating just beneath the water in the guise of the tendrils of pondweed or mats of fine duckweed, especially where it would be so easy to slip and fall into the water, hypnotic and entrancing, almost as though the riverbank continued as solid ground. The very young and the elderly are Jenny's victim of choice, those with not enough strength to fight her, those who are not as wary when near the deep water, those who don't know or who have forgotten the stories. She is said to be an image of an old woman, have the coldest green skin, long lank green hair, and the sharpest of teeth to bite with, long thin arms to grab the unwary and drag them to their doom. Her names are also Ginny Greenteeth and Jeanie Greenteeth, depending on which part of the county she is found in. At night, it is said she hangs listlessly in the high branches of trees whose boughs drift just below the surface of the river water, moaning in low tones, waiting for victims in the dark. In the morning, as light breaks, she returns to her watery lair to wait and hunt. Peg Powler. A similar cautionary water fairy for children is called Peg Powler. This evil water fairy hag dwells in the majestic River Tees in the northeast of England. Her favourite victims are once again children, and like Jenny, she is described as having long, lank green hair. She is said to have an insatiable longing to take human lives, tempting unwitting victims to the river where they would be drowned and devoured by her sharp teeth. Parts of the River Tees were prone to a foamy froth that floated on the water, and these rafts of froth are still known today as Peg Powler's suds. Slimier, smaller rafts of the foam are known as Peg Powler's cream. Some of this is a throwback to when the River Tees was one of the most important, mighty and industrial rivers of the UK Industrial Revolution. The poisons dumped in the river would froth and foam, and consequently treacherous to children were always drawn to play by or in water, and not realising that this was a toxic playground. And yet, the stories of Peg are older than this, so maybe she grew stronger during this industrial time. There is another version of Peg Powler also, this time a vision of a beautiful green-haired maiden, an evil spirit, also dwelling in the River Tees. This aspect of Peg will pretend to be drowning as a handsome young man approaches. He will try with all his might to save the beautiful maiden, but instead she will tempt him further and further into the water until she slowly takes his life. It is also said that she appears on land on foggy days where the river mist hangs heavy and low. Then she will find a handsome male victim in the fog and lead him on with false promises until eventually he is led into the water where he will meet his doom. The Asrai. The Asrai are a water fairy hailing from the north and Midlands of England. They live in lakes and rivers. They are shy creatures described as both tall, lithe and winsome, or small, only about as high as 4 foot tall. They are mere wisps of fairy maidens. There is a folk tale from both Cheshire and Shropshire that tells of a fisherman who caught one of these peculiar creatures and placed her in his boat. It seemed that she begged in her own language to be let free, but he decided not to do this. Instead, he took hold of her in his rough hands to tie her still in the boat, and at the mere touch of her cold skin, his hands burned like the harshest of fire, leaving dreadful scars that would stay with him all his life. Instead, he covered her with water reeds and water weeds while she continued to beg him for mercy. Little by little, her voice became more and more quiet, until it was almost a silent whisper. Eventually, he brought his boat to the shore, and all he found beneath the weeds was a small puddle of water. The Asrai had melted away to nothing. She had been in the sun too long, and had he known better, been a cleverer man, he would have known that an Asrai cannot survive long in the light of day. The Asrai are like the wisps and tendrils of mist that rise from the water and evaporate as the sun shines stronger. He did, though, have permanently disfigured hands to remind him never meddle with the Asrai again. There are other tales of the Asrai that tell of them having green, long hair and fish tails instead of legs as the merfolk do, or even webbed feet. In these legends, they are said to live for hundreds of years, rising once every 100 years to bathe in the magical moonlight which helps them to grow and flourish. A female Asrai of this type will lure innocent men to follow her, promising riches untold if he does follow, only for the poor and fortunate to be led deeper and deeper into her realm in the darkest part of the lake. However, Asrai being ethereally perfect, they cannot stand the rough earthiness of humankind for too long, and so they will release the men to make their way back to the surface, if they can hold their breath that long. However, this can also be a way to protect oneself against them, to behave as earthy and coarse as possible near the water, so they are repulsed and not attracted. Our humanity and our connection to the baseness of the earth, the dirt and rough living, this can be a way of protection. The Grindylow. The northern English counties of Lancashire and Yorkshire have another dark water creature called the Grindylow. It is connected to the haunting, dangerous bogs and mires of these counties' moorlands, the marshes, the freezing cold pools, and because of this and its connection to the swamps, it is thought that the name Grindylow may be connected to Grendel, the monstrous enemy of Beowulf that dwelt in the swamps nearby the mead hall. In the great poetic tale, Grindylows are said to be small, vicious creatures, human-like, but with a strange green scaled skin, long supernaturally strong hideous arms with extended probing fingers that end with sharp snatching claws. They have the same pointed teeth that all other water fairies seem to have. These they use to persecute and kill their prey, which once again very sadly are human children. The danger of the swamps, marshland and bogs of Yorkshire and Lancashire is very real. The endless moors are full of danger, jet black soil, tufts of coarse growth and deceptive drifts of water hidden by the grasses that grow through the wetness, the strange spongy quality of the earth. Let me tell you from experience, it is instinctively frightening, and to be stuck in the strange middle of this landscape can cause a panic. Walk one way, you may find more solid ground. Walk another and you may step into a bog that can take you whole. As beautiful as the moorlands of England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales may be, they are indeed treacherous and very dangerous places. The Knucker. The county of Sussex in England has a strange water creature called the Knucker. This is a water dragon that lives in knucker holes, deep round pools that are said to have no ending of depth, an unfathomless depth. The origin of the name is Nicor, Anglo-Saxon for water monster, and it is thought to be related also to Nixie, Nukur, Nikel, Naken, Nek, Nakanaki. All, like the Knucker, are northern European water spirits with ill intent, wicked creatures. The Knucker is a Wyrm, as in Wyrm type creature, a serpent, huge, skin cold as death, with a serpent's flickering tongue and hissing mouth, and deadly looking eyes. It is also described in the folk tales as having wings, and being a northern European dragon serpent would probably have had 4 legs, as that was the traditional look for worms of this area. In ancient times it was told that a famous knucker lived in Lyminster in Sussex. This beast was a living nightmare for the county. The knucker spent its days killing and eating the local villagers, the cows, the sheep, the pigs, really anything that it desired. The villagers met and decided that it had to be killed. There was nothing else to be done. There are 2 versions of the death and the killing of the Knucker of Lyminster. In the first tale, a wandering knight in search of adventure was offered the hand in marriage of the daughter of the local lord if he could kill the beast. This the brave knight did. He married a princess, the daughter of the King of Sussex, and they settled in Lyminster. On his death, a gravestone was erected by the people, known now still as the Slayer's Slab, which can be seen to this day within Lyminster Church. The other legend of the killing of the Knucker of Lyminster has it that a local farmer's boy called Jim Puttock, or in some tales called Jim Pulk, was born in Wick and killed the deadly Wyrm. He tricked the beast into its own demise by baking a great pie within which he had placed many a deadly poison. A clever trap indeed. He borrowed a strong horse and a cart and loaded the pie onto the wagon. Carefully he took the huge pie to the edge of the knucker hole. On smelling the pie, the dreadful knucker crawled from its dank, dark lair. Within a second it had gobbled up the pie, the poison, the horse, and even the cart. Soon the beast was stone cold dead, and Jim Puttock lopped off its head as proof. Tragically, however, the poor lad died of the same poison he had used to slay the dragon, possibly having spent too long touching the poisoned pie. He was carried back to the church of Lyminster a fallen hero, a tragic return, and buried with a hero's funeral. The Slayer's Slab is said also to be his gravestone. And there you have it, some strange, deadly and quite awful creatures that dwell in the fresh water. It is very weird that so many of them live in the north of England, maybe because it rains so much there and is therefore so marshy and boggy. I can say this in good faith, as I am a Lancashire lass myself from the northwest of England, and I know full well the amount that it rains. It was nice to be able to throw in a worm dragon, something totally different from my list of fairy folk and fae creatures. The fear of water is very real, you know, more so in the days where there was a lack of understanding of medicine and treatment of infections, of damp, cold, wet houses and cottages where if a fellow got wet they never really got dry again, the damp seeping right into the bones, sometimes leading to illness and sickness. And it was a time where people wore a lot of woolen clothing and a lot of clothes too. The weight of all that wet wool would have been deadly in itself if one had fallen into the water, the weight dragging a body beneath, like the grasping arms of Jenny Greenteeth. And yet water is essential every day, so it's no wonder that scary tales of water fairies, hags and worms were told so often. Anything to try and keep each other safe in the lonely places that adults and children would have been sent to gather the water. It is a very tragic thing that so many people still have to do this chore daily around the world. So, be safe around the water, dear friends, and especially all you younger and older listeners, because there may be long arms ready to grab you and sharp claws and teeth to keep you there. I hope you enjoyed this time's telling of tales. I really love making these videos. Folklore, the arts, history and nature are my 4 abiding passions, and sharing these with you is a real pleasure. The videos are a lot of hard work and research, but it's also a lot of fun and very creative. Let me know in the comments if there is a particular fae creature, or a fairy, or an animal or bird, a plant or a tree that you would like to see a video of. I'm doing my favourites little by little, but why not give me ideas? What would you love to hear about? Maybe it might be something that I've never thought of or never heard of. Do you have stories of wicked water fairies too? Stories from your family? We would love to hear about those. Pop everything in the comments. You know, we need to share our folklore to keep it alive. If you have enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe, and please hit the little bell symbol too for notifications of our next instalment. And please do tell others about the channel. Let's grow a community of lovers of all things fairy and folk tales, because all of these things help keep the channel and our stories alive. Until next time, dear friends, keep well, brightest of blessings, and remember, don't play with the fairy folk, or you may end up in one of my folk tales yourself.